on our agenda is an update to our protocols and legislative procedures, and I've invited Kathy Novak to come back and help us work through those. We got a little bit of a start on that a few weeks ago with Kathy, and so had an opportunity to get into her schedule and make some additional time in our schedule so that we can get through these. This is a typical exercise for councils every couple of years as a new council, new members on council are seated. We want to go through our protocols, our legislative rules, and just make sure that we're up to date and that we all have an understanding of what they are. A lot of times it helps to sit through an evening like this and kind of walk through them to become re-familiar with them and familiar with them. It is not legally binding. In most instances, some of these are also some legal requirements, but for the most part, it is a respect amongst each other. It is a understanding that this is how we agree that we want to conduct ourselves. There will be some as we walk through these that we may not all agree on, but of course we always defer to the majority, and the majority then carries the decision, and then the body supports the decision going forward. And so that's part of our rules and protocols, and that's something we want to make sure we also remember that we do that even this evening as we walk through this. The intention is that we will go through these. Kathy's going to lead us through an exercise that will help us kind of get ready into this. And then without going through these wordsmithing word by word, those types of things, we want to go through substantively. If we have additions or edits that we need to make, then we will ask Mark to make that happen, as will come back to us in the form of resolution at a future meeting. And we'll start with protocols, and then we'll go into legislative rules. And obviously Steve is here to help us with any of those that we may need to work through on that level. And then, so we've got 2 hours allotted for this. I know that Mark also has some protocols that staff has indicated that they would like us to look at. So we will talk a little bit about those as we walk through. So any questions on, yes, Carol?
I saw in section 5 of the legislative rules, I'm not sure I exactly understand this, but it seems to say we have to publish and post the changes along with the agenda of the meeting. And is that the meeting that it will be voting on the changes?
Yeah. So that will be in the packet. It will be our new legislative rules and procedures, which will be part of the packet. Yeah. So depending on how we do tonight, it could show up at our next meeting. And we do want to complete this tonight. This is just not something we're going to keep going and going. We need to get this done and get it taken care of.
Don't let him bother.
No.
Carol,
He's fidgety.
Oops. Oh, great. Jerry's fidgety. Okay, so
I'm
Kathy, the flu is all gone.
That's right.
Full health.
So it's too bad the weather isn't cooperating. You know, if we were in a big blizzard situation, or if this was like last night, you guys would be on target, on task, get out of here, 1 hour, get it done, get home, and get out of the snow.
No.
But when we have a beautiful Colorado evening like tonight, it's like, oh, it's beautiful. The sun might still be out. So, well, I'm pleased to come to be back with you to kind of pick up our conversation where we left off. And I'm just
Maybe
going
for
to...
the TV, you can say who you are.
Oh, sure. I'm Kat. You want me to do a little introduction? And for the people in the audience who probably weren't here the last time. So I'm Kathy Novak, and I work a lot with councils and boards across the country. My experience is 19 years as an elected official in your seats, 11 on my council, 8 as mayor, president of National League of Cities, literally worked with communities all over the country, especially on new council orientation retreats, how we build the group to make the best group possible going into our terms going forward. Currently, I have a full-time teaching appointment at the University of Denver and the business school, teaching management leadership at undergrad as well as the MS level. So happy to be here. So thank you for that. Well, we left off last time, and we kind of ran out of time, but really talking about how we build this group. And I was talking about expectations, and I think I left you with the example of my husband and our laundry dilemma, right? About whose job it was to do the laundry. He thought it was the wife's job. Well, there were a whole series of expectations that I had for him around a husband's job that I was more than happy to tell him that he was not living up to, right? Which causes that disconnect. And so in any new relationship, anytime you have new members of the body, which is what you have here, and I think it's important to check in every couple years. So how am I doing on these expectations you had of me? Am I still fulfilling them? Have they changed? Well, yeah, here's how I think they've evolved. So that's the conversation we're going to start off with tonight, and that kind of sets the basis then for the protocols and how you actually work together in the decisions that you make. All right? So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is a little personal work. I want you to take about 5 minutes and write down, what do you expect of your fellow council members? And it's open enough and vague enough to go wherever that takes you.
I expect my council members to have pens with them.
There you go, I have a marker I can show you. So take a few minutes and just jot down, what do you expect of your peers on council? Mark, if you would jot down some thoughts too, I'll entertain your thoughts as well. I'm going to add into kind of, you get to speak on behalf of all the staff. Kind of what you expect of the council as well. So I'm not letting you off the hook. I saw you enjoying a free moment there.
Right.
go around the table. I'm going to ask you to give me one item off your list, because I don't want Peggy to go first, and then she's exhausted everything you had down, Kyle, and then it looks like you have nothing to contribute. So, and I'm going to start with Jerry.
Sure.
Because the ends usually expect it, and I'm going to catch you off guard. Cool. So what's one thing on your list about what you expect of your fellow council members?
Be prepared. A great color to read.
I know. And so what does that look like to you?
What does,
Being prepared, what does that really mean?
knowing, reading your packet, being familiar with what's in there?
Okay. Did anyone else have be prepared? All right, so in your own words, what does that look like? Is it simply reading the packet?
And
Is there more to it?
Or believe you understand.
Okay, so understand.
Being prepared.
Yeah. Any other?
Asking
Questions.
questions.
Asking questions.
Okay, so let's talk about that asking questions. I feel kind of like Karnak. I already know what you're going to say, because every council does this, but
Well, just write it up there then.
no. You have to do the work. So, when it comes to asking questions, how and when and to whom?
So it's typically to Mark or city staff. So it's asking questions for clarity's sake, in my, for me at least, not necessarily to try to get an opinion, to form an opinion at that point. It's just making sure I understanding it the way I think I'm reading it, or is there more information I need to, be informed and prepared.
Good. And that's important, because especially as new members, so much of what you deal with isn't brand new stuff, right? And they're often landmines, hidden things, perhaps jargon, and it's always great to have that understanding ahead of time.
It's a lot of jargon.
A lot of jargon. What else about asking questions?
Say it
Kyle?
at the earliest possible time, because more likely than not, someone else has the same, if not a similar question. And allow Mark or staff to respond back as soon as possible. Let them be prepared.
Well, press on.
What's that?
I said he was trained well.
Yes. Right answer. Okay, good. What else?
Yeah, I add one, Kathy.
Yes.
I think we ask questions, especially I guess it's when it's among council members discussing an issue, is to be understood, to understand the other person's position. So listen to understand.
Well, so I think this is an important distinction, because being prepared is asking questions. It's asking questions of whom, when, right? Because if it's before the meeting, for clarity, that's typically the staff. If, and there's a whole nother set of protocols around talking to each other about these things, right? And we're very clear on what those rules are. So sometimes it's a one-on-one conversation. I defer to the city attorney to make sure that sequential conversations, that we're certainly following the open meeting rules. But if it's for clarity, typically from staff as early as possible to get additional information, that certainly enables staff then to say, oh, Emma wasn't clear. We need to send out additional information, or I know what's going to come up at the meeting, so we're prepared to do these things. Right? Okay? Anything else in being prepared? Okay. Mayor, what was one thing on your list?
Be professional.
It seems so simple, and yet that's a pretty loaded one as well, right? What does that look like, being professional?
Respect.
Oh, whoa, that's another big one. What does respect mean?
Being professional.
No, we're not going to get caught up in that. Nice try. Nice try.
I think that when you and you are not an elected, there are different sets of rules that you play by. When you are an elected, those rules, they all change. And I think a lot of times electeds may not understand or recognize the depth of that change. But there is, those who are not elected understand that change sometimes greater than those who are elected. And so it is understanding and recognizing that I think is probably one of the things that is a large challenge for new electeds. And I think it's also a challenge, the professionalism thing, not only of dealing with the community, but dealing with each other, and also dealing with staff. So now there's a whole different hierarchy, there's a whole different way of standards and norms and things that get done, and it's different than what it may happen in a different, where you're used to. And so it's how all of that works together at a completely different place when you're an elected.
And in addition, it's how you are with everybody outside the city.
Yep.
Because you are representing the city.
Exactly.
So, in a way, what I heard you say is you never get to take off your council hat. No matter how hard you try, it's always on. And so I'm kind of having to...
Can I wear a baseball cap?
I never got well, because the community never takes it off of you. The outside community never takes it off of you. Staff never takes it off of you. So if no one else is taking it off, you don't get to.
No, you don't. As much as you would like to some days.
You know, on a Sunday morning when I'm running to the grocery store, I really...
On a bad hair day, especially. You want that hat, but it's good. Okay. What else does kind of respect? How many else had respect? Okay.
I had different terms, but the same essence.
So what, like for you, what does that mean?
So I had a couple things like, no personal attacks or personal points of view, I guess, maybe.
Well, let's take those because I think they're actually two separate things. So hold on to that.
Okay.
Okay.
I have personal attacks is what I wrote down.
Okay, we're going to hold on to that one.
Okay.
Well,
And
for
kind of
the,
talking about respect and professionalism.
yeah, for me, that includes treating people the way I would like to be treated.
Good. So the golden rule.
And I'm assuming that I like myself enough to treat myself.
Yes. Yeah. Any other elements of the respect? Carol?
Hear each other out, and at the same time, don't take more time than your share. And together, both of them, as one.
You copied off me.
Well, I told you I
I
did.
told you not to look.
You say that too?
Not all that. I said it 2 words.
What'd you say?
I said no filibustering.
This is the hard stuff with the sticky on it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Much better than fumbling with the tape.
Yeah.
Anything else around respect or professionalism? You want to add? I'm sorry.
So it maybe is implied, but I think not assuming motives or meanings or whatever.
Let's actually make that a sentence. And that could be a really important one that's often assumed that we're not going to do this, and yet intentionally assuming positive intent instead of negative intent makes a world of difference on councils. Off facilitator hat, on experienced part of a council that was very, very dysfunctional. Our biggest problem was everything that came out of someone's mouth, it was wrapped in innuendo and assumption and meaning, when have a nice day actually just meant have a nice day, you know, instead of what do you mean by that? Actually, you know. And so assuming, you know, not assuming meaning and motive. And so what kind of behavior actually goes along with that, do you think?
Listening.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to what you were talking about, Mark, right?
And questioning.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Again, back to the ask.
Say, what?
I want you to use the exact phrase, the exact tone.
That's right. And you know, we're joking about it, but how important that tone is and how we're often not thinking about it, right?
Exactly.
What do you mean by that? Certainly conveys a certain message then. What do you mean by that? Tell me more, right? And so just being...
Jerry's going to need a lot of lessons.
And, you know, a lot of this may seem, oh, duh, it's elementary, we understand it, but the importance is in having the conversation shared is what's really important. So.
Kathy, I was trying to scribble everything. Are you going to give us a complete write-up?
Yes, yep, we'll write it all up, type it all up and send it back to you.
Preferably in color, too.
Actually what I do is type it up and then take pictures and send you the pictures, so that, because sometimes the pictures jump in. Okay, Kyle, or no, sorry, Mark, you had something else you wanted to add.
Well, I think it was just more back on being professional and respect. I think it's about not surprising each other, trying to avoid that. Maybe that's something separate. Trying to give each other a heads up if they say...
That would strike home for you?
Yeah, you know, I think it's in our business, it's pretty common, you know, the things come up. And so, you know, I think certainly from my position, I do not ever want to surprise a council member, so I work hard at trying not to surprise you. So.
And this is one that comes up every city I have done. And this was one that is constantly violated in dysfunctional cities. When you have council members who like to play snipers, either with each other or the staff, or play gotcha, I'm gonna come up with the best question I can to make the staff look stupid. And that's the intent. And you guys have already talked about, you know, I don't think that's the intent here by any means, because you've already talked about when you have questions, get them out in advance. And asking questions in advance doesn't mean that you don't ask them at the meeting, right?
Right, exactly.
Which is important. And sometimes it's just for personal, okay, I get it now, I don't have to ask that. But the no surprises comes up with, all right, I think I know the answer to this, but I want to give you a heads up because I'm not asking it for me, I'm asking it for John who's watching at home, so that this was a question that he had. I want to make sure, and if he had it, other people had it, let's get it out in public kind of thing. So that's part of that heads up piece too. And then we've had, you know, council members who, all right, I want this piece of information, but don't tell anybody else I have it, because I'm going to spring it at the council meeting. I know, by your responses like, seriously, people do that?
We can do that?
No! No!
Say what?
You can, but it would not. So it's that no surprises. Can anyone think of an example, maybe an experienced one where it worked?
It worked.
Or maybe when it didn't?
I don't think surprises ever work on a council. I think that it goes back to respect. And I think that for the most part, surprises are intentional ways to sabotage an effective council. They're effective ways to sabotage staff. They're effective ways to sabotage each other. And I think that a functioning council operates with a level of respect for each other, for the process. I think it's an embarrassment to the community, and I think it's a disservice to the community for a council to ever behave like that. And yes, we've had council members that have done it. It's happened over time.
We had it in the planning
It
committee.
doesn't stop happening because people are people. It happens on our boards and commissions. It's never right, it's always wrong. And I think that when you have a council that cares about each other more than they care about their own ego, you don't get that happening.
And people are people, and sometimes we do it without even thinking. I know an issue that cropped up in our city, and you'd think in the metro area we'd actually know what goes on. Well, with the demise of the Denver Post, nobody's going to know anything what goes on in the whole area. But I don't have any idea what happens in other places. We had a situation that really caused angst was when something happened in this person's ward. This council person knew about it because of a friendship or a relationship, and they didn't let this person know. And suddenly, so it was a Ward 4 issue, and a Ward 1 council member knew about it and was acting on it, thinking that they were helping a citizen, but didn't give the courtesy to let the Ward 4 person, hey, just want to let you know. Because that feels like you're being sabotaged or
Undermined.
undermined, right. And the intent wasn't there by any means, but it was just, oh, I didn't even think.
But is that a surprise? Then you go back up to you're not assuming, if you're assuming best of intentions and it wasn't intended as a surprise, that doesn't discern, that to me doesn't say dysfunctional council, it just
No.
says human.
No, absolutely.
So that's different.
Okay.
So I think what's also important is, and it goes back to the first one, sometimes there's surprises because we're not well prepared, whether it's us as council or staff, and then it's all of a sudden we get new information and you're not prepared to deal with it. And I'm sure it feels the same way from staff, that all of a sudden we ask a question or make a statement and you're not prepared for it. So a lot of that, again, if there isn't bad intent associated with it, can be solved through being prepared.
And so that often leads to kind of another expectation. So when that happens, and if it hasn't happened yet, it will happen at some point, that something comes up at a meeting that catches you off guard, or an additional piece of information the staff couldn't anticipate, came in last minute, and you're like, whoa. Do you know how you're going to handle that?
We yell at Mark.
You just, Mark, what do we do? Or, Attorney, what do we do? But that's something to even talk about as well. Do you stop and say, wait a minute, let's put this on a future agenda till we all feel more prepared? And know that you can, is that something you can do?
We have done that, right? I mean, that is something we did with the wildlife,
Drew?
right?
Okay, good.
Yeah, that's popped up, I'd say, a fair amount here. Even with this new council, I'm trying to think of some good examples, but you seem to kind of flag those from my perspective when you think you need more conversation, so.
Because sometimes we, as elected officials, almost forget what power we do and don't have, and whose meeting it really is, because it really is your business meeting. And very rarely, and staffs are really good about anticipating what has short time horizons, when they need to stretch it out. And I think for the most part, rarely are those emergencies. If you don't act on it tonight, the whole world will end. That, no, all right, we're not ready. It needs more deliberation. We need more input. We need to think more. So. Kyle, what's one thing you had?
Let's see, I'm going to say three things because I think they're all about the same thing. But open-mindedness, cooperation, willingness to compromise.
Cooperation or collab?
I said cooperation and compromise.
Do you want to talk a little bit more what you're thinking about this?
No.
Why is this an important expectation for you?
Because we're a body and not individual, and it's for the entire community, and not to be set in your own. You have your feet set in concrete, not willing to give an inch. If you're not willing to give, and it's just going to lead to dysfunction, and then kind of butting heads and aggression maybe.
Anybody else want to comment on this?
What we're looking for with that is really all of us trying to get the best outcome possible. And if we don't keep the mind open, even to that last comment that a citizen might make at a public hearing or a council member might make during the discussion as just before we vote, it's all really important, I think.
Personal agendas kind of falls in there a bit, because there's, oftentimes it's easy to kind of bring your own personal agenda to a conversation, which stops that ability to be more open-minded and look at things from a different perspective. And I think that's a challenge with an elected too, is that it's fine when you're not having a conversation about politics with your family, but when you're representing a portion of a community or an entire community, it's a whole different way of thinking.
Yeah, you got to be flexible.
Yeah.
As we've seen on the television, unwillingness to compromise is a good way to not get anything done.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this is why I think people have the greatest amount of trust in local government and frankly the greatest hope in our local levels for this country surviving. Is because, leaving those personal agendas and willingness to compromise.
Sounds like a personal comment.
It is, all right, took my hat off.
But I think with what Kyle just said about not getting something done, sometimes you get something done, but it's not the thing that is the best that could have been done because, you want to just get it done and move on. But hearing somebody else's view that can sometimes tweak in the smallest way and yet have magnitudes of effect.
And this is kind of the art of leadership, that you will be in, is you're never going to have perfect information. And so do you put off a good answer in search of the perfect one? But when do you know that, it's just not the right time to move forward yet? We need more information. And nobody has that answer except you all. And it's going to be different with every issue and different with every person. But that's where the art comes in. Patrick?
Yeah, a lot of things you've already mentioned, but certainly outside of council or outside of study session, I just put note, I don't want to be stabbed in the back, talking ill of me outside of council. You do it in front of my face, I don't care. But
You don't?
it's just like an expectation.
Great. And I think, again, our dysfunctional times, it was always, oh, well, nah. And thinking, I think some of the thought was that among members of council, that somehow making somebody else look worse made them look better. But the reality is it just reflected poorly on the community as a whole. And same as when you attack staff. Not you, but when people attack staff in public, it's like, hold on. That makes all of us look bad. So.
I had to that support each other. And, I think sometimes it can be, support doesn't mean agree with. Support means that you are honoring their decision, you're honoring their process, you're honoring, we all go through the same process. We always don't come up at the end with the same decision, but it's an honoring of that.
To support me, is there anything else you would add in terms of supporting each other?
I'm not sure where this one fits because each time something comes up, I'm like, oh, I think this one fits into that. But fit into the support after a decision is made, even if you're not voting yes for that decision, we still have to support the overall decision of council and advance that forward, as opposed to constantly saying, no, that's not the way I voted, or, so once we make a decision as a council, regardless of how you voted, we have to all work as a council to further that decision.
So This is one that actually I think is really important to talk about because different communities choose to handle this in different ways. So what if it's a 4-3 vote? You know the 4 prevails, but you feel really strongly about it. Does this mean that you can't offer your opinion? You can't say, yeah, I didn't vote that way? Does it mean, what does that actually mean and how do you want to operationalize that? Again, different places have done different things. Is it, and it's helpful, I think, to have language, especially if you have contentious ones. Sometimes it's language like, if somebody says, can't believe that vote passed that way. What do you think about that? Well, council decided. That's our process. As you know, I wasn't on the winning side. Do you leave it at that? Does it mean that you don't actively work against it? I didn't get my way, so I'm going to work to undermine this. There's a variety of ways to look at this, but it's important to talk about how this group of 7 wants to approach that and what it really means. So since you brought it up.
Yeah, so for me, your first scenario that was, allowing you to state your position and opinion of, kind of where that decision was, but it was respectful to yourself and your decision as well as to the council. What I would also say is, if there's constantly a trying to do and undo, then no one's effective because you do nothing. And so I would lean more towards, this is the decision that council has made. I have, on the other side of that decision. But what I would do is continue to, move forward with that decision and still try to say, okay, what are some of the things that I can contribute at this point that helps offset some of the risks that I've had concerns with, et cetera, so that I can still support the agenda moving forward, but try to make it better based on the things that maybe I...
And what do you all think about that?
Contrary to.
Sure, that's one answer.
Yeah, right, see? This is where it gets hard, right? Carol, you mentioned.
I was, in our protocols and standards that we have now, meeting protocols, we have something really similar to that, which is item J. I'm not going to read it out loud, but it's very similar to that.
I think that can be one of the hardest things because, and there have been issues, one of them that we've dealt with a number of years ago repeatedly, as every city has, is the marijuana. And it comes down pretty passionately. And I've watched council members when we were debating that. We had the medical debate a couple of times. We've had the retail debate a couple of times. And council members who have been very adamant one way or the other, and then the vote was the other way, and watched those council members be very, very appropriate in the way that they shared that message. Other issues can have a different result. I think sometimes it does depend on the issue, but one of the ways that I think is important for representatives, because where we get into this angst is that if the community comes back to us and says, I cannot believe you guys did that. I put you in office, I didn't expect you to vote, and you didn't vote for it, right? They're yelling at you because of what happened. To have the opportunity to share, I represented you, but we operate with a majority rules. I was in the minority. The majority has voted this way, and so I support the body, and I will work towards what we need to do for that. the vote is over, the vote is done, and move forward. And that's where I have a little bit of disagreement with Karina in that to continue to work to try to adjust the way that something may be moved ahead.
Well,
Maybe sometimes it depends on what the topic is and if it's still in process or whatever, but I think it's something that each individual person has to come to their own peace with. And a lot of times after a council meeting, when it's been really hard, it takes time. I mean, it can take a couple of days to really come to peace with it before you can even talk to somebody. And you need to take that time. You need to let yourself process that.
And when something is really contentious and something is really hard, it gets very emotional, and nobody likes to lose. And so when you are on the losing side, it takes some kind of figuring that out. In listening to what you were saying, even thinking about the marijuana issue and kind of what you were saying, and I don't know how it turned out, but say,
It turned out good.
Okay, I don't know what that means. I'm supporting the body. There you go. I don't know what that means.
We don't have retail.
Okay, so for example, if you had retail, it might be that, look, we did the best we could. We represented your interests and viewpoints. This is the way the body went. I understand your concerns, and I'm going to make sure that we can do everything we can to address your concerns, given the direction the city's going. Which is what I kind of heard you say.
Yes, so it was not for intent to sabotage or undermine the decision of the body, but to use that as an example is, okay, if retail marijuana did move forward, and that was the decision of the body, regardless of what even if I had a different decision, it would be, okay, how do we make it more safer? Or what are some of the things that we can put into this to make it safer or et cetera? So it's more of not to sabotage, but to, kind of, and enhance if there's an opportunity to make it better.
And it may be clearer, instead of saying support, to actually use do not undermine, because, or to be neutral if you oppose or whatever, but sometimes support in my mind means you really are getting out there advocating, but if you just don't be negative about it and just move forward.
Well, and words matter, and the way we understand it is important. So what I heard was to support that the decision has been made according to an appropriate and correct process, and we won't undermine it kind of thing. So, but certainly understanding support doesn't mean I'm suddenly going to change my mind and be a cheerleader for it, right?
I think it's support of the body.
Right.
In the process.
Yeah, it's support of the body. You may never support the decision, but you're supporting the body.
And the process. So, Patrick, that was yours.
Yes, I'm sure.
I'm sorry, Kathy, can I just add quickly to that? Because there is a staff perspective to this. Just don't want it to be lost here. So, I think many times council, for whatever reason, may decide to go against the staff recommendation. No problem. But staff's just like any other human. So when that comes back and we're debriefing all of that, we have to obviously do our best to support whatever the body is, their decision. And we have to, at times, kind of come to grips with that and wrestle with it. And so I think just kind of acknowledging that. But again, it's the intent is to, as staff, is to support the body, the council's decision.
Within that, is there a sense of helping the staff understand why? Or is that something separate?
I think the why council may have gone a different direction. I think that's definitely worth debriefing, and I think we take that approach here, quite honestly, the day after every single council meeting and study session.
Staff goes to a room, shuts the door.
At the cry room.
What were those people thinking?
I know.
This is a good place to put transparency up there.
Open meetings.
Well, and I think a lot of times a decision that may affect one department, I'm certainly looking for a broader impact to the larger organization. So there may be issues that a council decision that may have been focused narrowly, but the impact of that, quite honestly, is much broader if you step back and look at it for the organization. So that's why we debrief every single one of these things. You talk about what was the recommendation, what was the decision, and why.
Well, there might be a different piece of that. We might support something staff proposed for different reasons.
Well, that too. That could be.
And so conveying that back to staff,
Yeah.
right?
He really plays a critical translation role in the city, right? Trying to translate your intents, the conversation, the action to staff who probably wasn't at the meeting. They're not going to watch the meeting, but they have to act on it. Likewise, what is staff doing? Translate that to language that you all understand as policymakers, which may be very different. Peggy, what's something that we haven't said so far?
Give fair consideration to all issues that come before council. Keyword being fair consideration.
So that means not discounting, oh, that's not important to me, so let's just deal with this first and get on with things, is that?
Right, or maybe there's some little trigger on some piece of it that can temporarily, permanently block
Okay.
your perception of what this really is about, right? Or just one word triggers you and then you just...
Any comment on that or question? Okay, Karina, anything else to add? And that one I told you to hold, and it's not up here yet.
I don't know, because that one wasn't written down.
So now's the time, you can put that one up here.
You look puzzled.
Because I don't remember what it was, because I didn't write that one down. I just came out as part of the other one. But one that is written down was to speak or articulate the basis of your concerns. So give some of that context of why you agree or disagree or why you're asking that question.
Why don't you want asparagus? Because I hate asparagus, right?
There you
I
go.
don't care how you fix it.
Good. So good. One why behind. Carol.
Forthrightfulness, which has an element of honesty, and it has an element, I think, what Patrick means when he says transparency.
Is that what you mean, Patrick?
That's what I mean.
Thanks for asking that question.
He's agreeable.
Do you have an example?
I think Jerry has an example.
That spotlight.
Well, let's take Carol, for example.
Okay.
2 hours later for this one.
We're almost done with this part.
Having Costello over there.
No, I don't.
Okay. Okay. Any question about what this means, though, or?
I wrote honesty.
Honestly,
But, you know, I mean, potentially you could take a position on something and give a reason, but it's not your real reason. That's,
Oh,
right?
lovely. That's perfect, Peggy.
Geez, thank you.
So motive, like what's the motive?
Because you don't want to reveal,
Right.
you know, that piece. Maybe you're vulnerable, if you're running for election, maybe you're vulnerable if somebody knows your real reason. So,
And that also comes back to kind of the no surprises rule and heads up thing. You know, that even if you're going to ask a question that you know might be potentially difficult or challenging, hey, you know, or let the council let you know I'm going to ask this question.
So that point, council, I'm going to let you know I'm going to ask that question. That means that goes to everybody.
No, you got to talk to the attorney for the
Right,
proper
okay.
processes. I'm not saying.
Okay.
And maybe it's through through Mark.
You're not the first to do that.
I know. You have two almost first names.
I know, sorry.
Adam Paul, I call him Paul.
Yeah. And so it may be that, okay, just a heads up, and he may say that, you know, we've heard that there's a question of this that may come up at the meeting. And I don't know if the attorney would, I don't want to get into into hot water and step in it, because this is a really sensitive issue. So, I think, you know, Mark, I'm going to ask this question.
Yeah.
How do we get it out? Just give a heads up to the council.
Yeah, I think, I think they could all be a little bit different, but I think giving me kind of a heads up, hey, I'm going to be asking this question, and it could be as simple as I just tell the staff, be prepared, and maybe even address it right up front, and acknowledge the fact that the council member wants to ask it. We talked about this earlier. Maybe it's more just for, you know, the public's consumption of whatever that question and answer is. Those are probably the easy ones. I think if you've got something that you share that I think may be somewhat of a surprise to the rest of council, that's one where I would probably want to find a way to kind of share with all the council. And I think one of the techniques that, you know, we've been using here is you've been great about reading a lot of this material in advance and giving me questions. And, you know, we respond just in general. I don't even necessarily acknowledge where the questions come from, but so, you know, that might be another opportunity if there's something that I think the council needs to be aware of. I use that as an opportunity to kind of alert all of you. Again, it's back to this no surprise issue here, just kind of a heads up.
And I think the same applies from the legal standpoint. Sometimes the questions are fairly straightforward. Sometimes the questions require me to sit down and give it some thought. And it's very, very difficult when it's one of those questions where it requires me to give it some thought to try to be doing that in a council meeting. Because sometimes you'll see that I'll get up and I'll be pulling books off the bookcase or whatever because it's a question that needs some thought. I think the other thing that is part of this is that if you have a concern about particularly an agenda item out of the city attorney's office, come see me ahead of time. It creates a real, as your lawyer, I'm always going to be respectful towards you. I have to be that. That's the ethical obligations I have as a member of the bar. But if you have a concern and I don't know about it, sometimes the interaction between me at the podium and you at the dais can get really kind of disjointed because I'm not aware of the concern. So really the things in terms of that forthrightness is if you have an item, come see me in advance. It works much better if you don't surprise me, or if it's a significant legal question, come see me and give me the opportunity to look at it.
If I could just quickly follow up on that, if I may, Kathy. I think too, you know, when staff responds to, say, a question, you don't necessarily have to agree with that response.
Right.
Obviously, if you disagree, not a problem. But love the opportunity to kind of know what the question is and respond. And then if you have a different opinion at the dais, fine.
Right.
And I would ask too that there's, as the mayor, I think that if a council member wants to make it, you know, they know that they want to make an amendment to something, or they know that they have an intention to pull something off consent, or they want to do something, change the agenda or something like that, it's always better to let the mayor know that that is what you intend to do. And I think sometimes it can be challenging for a council member because I'm also part of the council. So while I am the person who presides the meeting, I also have, you know, I'm one of 7 who will be making decisions and voting. So the separation there is that if you want to make an amendment, that you need to let me know that you need to, I'm not going to talk you out of it as a council member because of that. I mean, you know, but it just so that there's, again, it goes back to the no surprises.
So you kind of know what to expect.
Mm-hmm. And the meetings run better that way, because if you know what, if I know what to expect, then I know I can be better prepared, which is also there.
I'm sorry, Kathy, just kind of along the mayor's lines there, something we haven't really talked about here is maybe the wildlife ordinance is perhaps an example, but if there's a...
This sounds interesting.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I just had to say, what?
Rewind.
Middleton had a life than we do up in North Glen. So.
Well, and I was thinking of, if we have enough kind of notice here, say as we submit questions here Monday by noon, if a council member is looking for some kind of an alternative motion or a more detailed kind of approach to an ordinance, more words to be added, staff can certainly look at that and try to prepare something that we could share with all the council in advance. I've seen city councils do that in other cities. Timing can be an issue there, so staff would have to have enough advance notice there. But sometimes that can facilitate a better conversation. Now, if you got a minor change on an ordinance, obviously that's no big deal. I probably don't want to necessarily know all that, but if it's something substantial, I guess is perhaps my point.
Like the example like what Peggy just did, where she, and I appreciated having that
The
handed to me,
definition.
that there might be an amendment, there was likely going to be an amendment, it's on a definition, so I appreciated having that, so would that be?
That's kind of the example I guess I'm thinking of. We handled it, I thought, pretty well at the meeting, but
You just added a couple more.
Couple of amendments.
The more notice the day before would be convenient, I guess, is maybe another option.
You look like you want to say something, Steve.
Well, no, I mean, that actually worked out very well because I had the opportunity to go back and forth with Councilmember Cole, understand what she wanted. Again, sometimes, I don't want this taken the wrong way, but I've had council members in my career who would hit me up the hour before the meeting and say, oh, I need an amendment to this ordinance. The trouble with that is, from a staff standpoint, I want to do good legal work, so I need to get it drafted. Then I really don't like the practice of not having the entire council with it. So thank you very much, Councilmember Cole. You got with me early. We were able to go through it. We got to the language that you wanted, and the council all had copies of it. And that process, from my standpoint as a lawyer, I really don't like the process of coming in and not having you all have exactly the same information.
Well, and because you are now all political junkies, when you travel, you watch the public access channel to see how other people's meetings run, no doubt. And I've seen them where they're rewriting things, and the attorney, can we have some language? And he says something and says, okay, I move what he said. I was like, well, what was that? Well, not exactly, we all vote yes. And then the staff's like, what exactly happened? So, okay. So we've been once around. Is there anything else up here that any of you wrote down that is not currently? Thank you.
So, I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, but with the emphasis on trying to find weaknesses in proposals, because it's easy to maybe see something, say, man, I like that. If you don't look at it rigorously, you may not see a flaw that could easily or not so easily be remedied by some kind of change. Maybe it's like the wildlife thing or not, but it's looking with what is the
Kind of a critical eye.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not about a weakness or a negative, it's another, what is the other side to this that we might look for, right?
Well, this is the English teacher, and sorry, Jerry. This is,
I like English. That's my number one language.
the English teacher piece
my only language.
isn't your background. Trying to hear something that is being communicated that wasn't intended in there, because if you're reading in a sense you think this is what you're meaning, but sometimes it's worded and you have to be almost a hostile reader to see this. I'm not saying it well at all.
So are you saying to have a critical eye or not have a critical eye?
To have a critical
Okay.
eye, to come antagonistically at it. It's the kind of thing that people learn they have to argue the opposing side. and then somebody else has got to counter that, right? So it's trying to find any flaws or
Ahead of time.
and particularly
Sure.
ambiguities, right? That need to be taken care of.
I think, carefully analyzing, maybe as opposed to antagonistic.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily want to come at it, it's coming at it with
different-
assuming of a negative intention.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we've already said we need to assume best of intentions, and I think one thing I would add up there is to support staff and trust staff.
I will clean up the trash at the end.
I'm not sure where to put
You're
your
fine.
steps.
Why is that different than be professional, respect, all that? Does that fall into the same thing, or is this intended to be something specifically different?
It is a category on its own.
When I see the professional respect, a lot of that, I think of us, of the council. That's where my head was. Obviously it transitions over to staff, but I think that there's over the years we've seen it happen where, like I think you said it earlier, sniper attack on staff, and that's just not cool. That's just not, staff is there to support us. The staff they don't have a dog in the fight. Their only job is to give us what we need. They work with that intention, and I think that a good council-staff relationship has that understanding and has that respect mutually between the two. And so that creates a healthier sharing of information, and where Peggy's talking about, to look antagonistically at the words and stuff, I would come more at it from a place of assuming that, if there's an error in there, yes, we need to catch it. Staff would be more upset about the error than we are because they don't want to give us things like that. But to work collaboratively, cohesively, cooperatively with staff as opposed to opposite ends, behind the scenes, at the dais, after the meeting, before the meeting, at all times.
So does that mean that council can never offer criticism?
Oh, no, but there's a way to handle that properly.
There is a line too with criticism.
Yeah, and we don't, council only has the 3 direct reports, so criticism beyond what we need to say to our city manager or city attorney or judge is completely not our place.
And often councils frame it in terms of public praise, private criticism. That, and again, when councils spend all their time in meetings criticizing the staff, the citizens are often saying, what's wrong with you, council? Can't you hire a competent staff? What's wrong with you? Right? So there's that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that up to make sure that's, doesn't mean you can't criticize, but what's the appropriate way?
I don't want to confuse what I was saying about reading with a critical eye as being critical of staff. There's a huge difference in that. So those are both being supportive of staff, working as, in a sense, as a team in the products that we wind up with.
To get the best possible.
Yeah. It's like, if you're testing a car, you might have loved a car, but there might be some bad feature of it. You can be critical of that feature, but you don't have to be critical of the salesperson or whatever, so.
Well, I would say the other balance to that would be that staff, we talk about us asking staff, and then that staff asks us too, because so that avoids a lot of assumptions about what we may be thinking or about what we may be, whatever the case. But I think to have that open communication, that always stops problems and that dialogue, and it creates that trust. And that all transcends out to the community too, because the community can tell, they can see that. They know if this council's operating highly functioning council. They know if this council appreciates and respects their staff. And they know, and we've all watched councils who don't, and we've all watched councils. I remember when years ago I was watching council and it felt like watching my parents fight. I did not want to watch the people who led my community sit there and behave like that. It just was troubles bothering, very, very. So that's why it's so important that we have these things in place and that we all agree and work with them cohesively, because at the end of the day, it really is about this community.
Anything else that you had written down that we don't have up here yet?
I have, don't be afraid to think outside the box, creatively, innovatively, differently.
You said innovatively?
Mm-hmm.
I had two. One is, and it may fit into a category up there, have honest conversations even when they're difficult. And then the other one is enjoy the work. I'm glad you said that. If you don't enjoy it, probably should have. And there's tough days, there's hard times, there's challenges, but you know what? You got to enjoy this while you're doing it. It's not forever, and we're very privileged to be able to do it. We're a small fraternity in the world of careers, and so you can tell those who don't enjoy it. You can tell those who do.
Well, and even the laughter around the table here tonight is important and encouraging and indicative of the kind of community that you created here and that you want to create in your city. So, anything else anybody has?
And being good fiduciaries.
Anything else?
What do you mean by that, Peggy?
And I actually have a little bit longer. It's of the citizens' revenues.
So specifically from
And of course, people spend money in the city that we like too, but what I'm looking at is that we take great responsibility in, if we happen to be rolling in money, we still should be good fiduciaries, right? Not wasting stuff.
Anything else?
I'm sorry. I just had one.
That was three more than.
I know.
I
I can't count.
What three?
Cannot count.
It's gonna be the last one, otherwise you'll keep coming up with more.
Well, and when I go back to what do we expect of each other, one of the things that I really do expect I expect it of myself, and therefore I really do expect it of the council, is to follow our rules.
That rules?
Yep. I mean, and that's key, right? It's just like, and setting up the next piece of the conversation is if you don't have the rules and if you don't all agree to them and agree to support and abide by them, you may think you're playing soccer, and if the rest of the council thinks you're playing rugby, you're in for a big surprise. And yeah, you're going to get hurt, and that's not a good thing. So that leads us well into the next. So I'm sure there's anything else.
Yeah, have a sense of humor.
How are we doing? Kathy, do you have an idea how you want to proceed with these?
Yep,
Okay,
I do.
great.
Whether or not it's the right way, but I have an idea.
Anyway,
Mark, anything else that's up there from a staff perspective?
No, not from a staff perspective.
Okay.
It's a good list.
Perfect. So, as we look through the document in front of you, a couple of things to kind of frame this. This is what's currently in place. these are your current rules, and I think it's important that, number one, agree not to wordsmith tonight, but really if we can capture kind of intent and what we're trying to do, what's the spirit of the pieces that need to be addressed, and give that direction to staff to bring something back to you to then check the words and, you know, when it's at a place that you're ready. The other thing is, this is not a regular meeting, so you can't vote. And I'm not going to ask you to vote. So we're going to have to ask for suggested language.
All the time at these meetings.
Say what?
Steve, know that. I don't think he'd let you get away with that. So it's a matter of,
Go to the corner for 5 minutes.
that's right. It's a matter of kind of getting a sense of where the direction is, knowing that when it finally comes before you, you can still choose to amend or that kind of thing, because you will be voting on it. And once it's voted on, those are the rules. Okay, so I just want to make sure that that's.
And in our legislative rules, we do, under study sessions, we do say council may vote or take consensus to give direction to staff. Study sessions shall not be a forum for public hearings. But yeah, so we.
Perfect, okay, so we can do kind of a straw poll.
Yeah, we
You
just
do a
do.
consensus, but you cannot formally vote, and the consensus is basically direction we'll take, it's not binding.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
And we're really only voting on
correct.
giving
Good point,
direction to
Patrick.
staff
That's
All
what I
right,
meant.
which is great, because different cities do it
differently.
differently, so. So as you all had a chance to look through here, my thought was to kind of raise the issues, like the big ones that you want to address, and let's see how many want to talk about that so that we can best use our time. Because if there's things that 5 of you want to talk about, let's do that. If there's something that one of you wants to talk about, we'll try and address the bigger ones first, and just to be cognizant of time.
But are you on the, which one, are you legislative rules or the protocol? Procedures?
I have the protocols and standards of conduct.
Yeah, we'll start with that one.
I don't have a hard copy. Do we have an extra hard copy somewhere? Mine's
Oh, I do have it there.
Be prepared.
Well, I am. At home, I'm very prepared.
Is there one over here?
No,
You know what? Jeremy, go upstairs, and I'll just print a couple.
You know what? Oh, here, you can use mine until he gets back. Just to, kind of to look at.
I left that at home. Yeah, I was in a bit of a hurry when I left.
So let's just see if we can kind of brainstorm a list of kind of the topics that might need to be looked at. And so we've kind of almost implied this is how you want it to work. There's stuff in here that works. So what we want to look at is what can you do differently perhaps, what's missing, what might need to be tweaked. We're not throwing everything out and starting from scratch at this point. So we can just kind of throw out topics.
So Kathy, I mean, I'm skimming through this now, having gone through that. So there's a lot that's already here, and actually Carol pointed it out earlier too, on a comment that I made that it was on 70.
So this is kind of the background discussion that these should be reflected in.
You want us to figure that out now?
Well,
Keep it in mind, yeah.
I think a lot of them
it is just, I think they are reflected, but just as you
Yeah.
go through, and if you read through before, is there anything that kind of jumps out as like, I want to talk about this one at least. So that's what I'm looking for, just issues to talk about.
One of them that I think needs some work is on page 3, Roman numeral 3, confidential information. I think that really does need some work, and that may be something that we just have the city attorney put some thought on. But this, this does not, I think it needs to be a lot more clear, and I think it needs to be more specific. We do not have the privilege of exec sessions at this time, and so we have to operate oftentimes with privileged information for legal purposes. So I think that needs some clarity there. And then I also think that Roman numeral 4, making public statements, I think that is something that needs to have conversation, and particularly also with boards and commissions also, because all of our protocols and rules apply to our boards and commissions. We've made that kind of a rule. So I think that those are important. And we talked a little bit about the support of the body, and I think that there needs to be some conversation around what does it mean as a council member when you are making public statements? What can you say, what can you not say, what
Do
should
you
you
have
say?
that, do you have language in there about that?
I did not write language.
No. Is there existing, is that?
Yeah,
addressed?
there's item, it's it's Roman numeral 4, A, B, and C.
It's making public statements is the heading.
Yeah.
I see your point here, because I do think we were very direct on some of this, like like the no backstabbing, the no surprise, supporting the body of council, I think all kind of comes into, a rework of this section to better reflect the sentiment and the information we've shared here, because I think it's kind of weak.
Yeah, I agree, because I think, like a broad statement, any comments made by a council or board member at a meeting of another board should be assumed to be the council board member's personal views or opinions, not the official position of the council. The verbiage should be, council and board members should not, I think it should be clear that not that it's the audience's place to assume that we're not doing. No, it needs to be, these are our behaviors. The other one I was looking at, and this is, Mark, you need to write this down real quick.
I'm writing.
Under Roman numeral 2, meeting protocols, I think we changed that to 5 p.m., but check with Wendy. That's about receiving public comments the day of the meeting. That's a tweak that Mark can take care of, because we already have made a decision on that. Unless council doesn't like it, we can talk about that.
I'm sorry.
Just a couple more. And then, under 3.
Plus X.
Yeah, algebra. Item, I guess it would be 7, Roman numeral 7, council conduct with boards and commissions. Item A, the last paragraph, council communications with boards shall be solely through a joint work session or through council liaisons as set forth. I think we need to have a little bit of conversation about that, because I know we've each had board members that have reached out to us. I think that there may have been at one time something that got snagged up and caused this to need to be in there, but I think that if we have some sort of guideline that we maintain an evenness of communication and evenness of information amongst each other for those instances, but this really is very restrictive, and I don't think that's.
I don't think it's healthy either.
No, I don't either, because if a new board or commission member reads this, it's going to be like, wow, council, stay away from this.
Between the quasi-judicial and the non, because certain kinds of things we can't.
Well, but I think that would be a completely different
I know,
category of
but
quasi-judicial.
That's what I'm trying to say, is that
Yeah.
that could be differentiated in here. So if I bump into somebody from the museum board and they ask what happened on council,
You better come to me before you talk to me.
Give me a heads up, right?
And that could even be a note that's in here that says, please see section blank for the quasi-judicial.
Yeah.
And then, under 8, the role of the liaison shall be to convey current and relevant information on council activities to the. I do think that there needs to be a little bit of maybe even more clearly defined there, because there has been, in the past, there's been a little some over eagerness of council liaisons and their activities on the boards and commissions, and we've had, on occasion, a board chair come and have a concern with the liaison because of those things. So I think that it needs to be very clear, and the boards and commissions need to understand what that is too. Because one of the things that there isn't, and this would be a whole conversation for another day, but there's no council. When we do something.
For our own bad behavior.
Well, yeah, who spanks us when, it's like lawyers, Carol, lawyers are the judges of lawyers, judges are the judges of judges, doctors are the judges of doctors. So, we don't have a ethics thing, we don't have a censor thing or anything like that. So those are it. Now I'm done.
That was important.
Okay, Carol, you had your hand.
Going back, relating to, up at the very top of, where we were talking about a word rather than support. I think Peggy had a word or almost did, and it kind of came out to do not undermine. I would like to apply that to item J under meeting protocols, number 2.
2J?
2J.
It says that in there, doesn't it? Refrain
Or
from reminding.
2B, no, J. Okay, so it says, however, after the decision has been made, the member should support the decision of the body and move forward. And since we had a discussion there about what support means, and maybe it means not actively cheerlead, that was part of the
undermining it.
but it means do not undermine. We should clarify that here. Because it was an important, we spent a fair amount of time on talking about what support means.
Anything else that anybody wants to talk about?
Well, hold a second on that.
Okay. Because we might.
If we accept the decision and move on, which is more neutral, so you don't have to be out, being a cheerleader, which support maybe conveys some of that sense, but accepting it and moving on.
What do you guys think about that? Because this could be a fairly easy one to.
It's just simple. It's support of the body, period.
And here it says support the decision of the body. So maybe we not.
That was the one that I was meaning. Is in this one to accept the decision. And
Suggestion to change the word support to accept.
No, I absolutely not. It's support. I think it's. I don't think that. I think accept means that I lost. I accept it all. I don't think the council should have to accept. I think they support. You support what the body said. You may not agree. We talked about that you can be clear about where you stood, but now that the vote's over, this is where you stand. And I don't know that accept is that. Support is the standard verbiage for that action amongst councils. It's not accepted support of the body.
So what it says here, this is what we debated up there, is that right now it says supports the decision, but what we tried to articulate there was that we support the body, we support the process, and therefore a decision that came out of it. So maybe it's just switching, taking out it's not that we're supporting the decision, we're supporting the body and process, and the decision that's been made now moves forward. So I think it's maybe either switching those words around or taking out decision.
I'm okay with the way it is. I mean, we can write it 20 different ways, but it's still okay.
As long as we all know
Yeah.
what that means too.
I would like to go back, because we talked about it so long. So let's talk about it some more, Jerry. Haven't had. The marijuana was an example where does it mean if like in our city, that medical or retail marijuana was voted against, does support mean that those who voted for it are required to say, yes, I'm for it? And I think where we got to is no, that isn't what it means.
Right.
But some people would think that support does mean that.
Yeah.
I mean, some people really do look at it that way. And so it's clear to you
So
what it
then
means, Debbie, but it's not clear to everyone.
Can I propose a change then? So if it reads, however, after the decision has been made, the member should support the body and move forward. I mean, it already talks that the decision has been made, and now we're supporting the body and moving forward.
And I think the two sentences prior are maybe enough. It says don't undermine. You can communicate your reason for the vote.
Yeah.
When was this drafted? Any idea?
Last year.
Yeah.
2017
I think last year's council did a good job.
It was adopted
Worked for me.
February 2nd, 2016, and amended on February 7th, 2017.
What if we just took that
We spent time on
that last
I bet.
sentence out?
So I think it's
Since
voted
we've already said should refrain from undermining, that's really what we want to get at.
Well, let me ask a question. Is this the biggest issue that you want to spend the time tonight talking about?
Yeah, no.
Yes,
I think it's a fair one.
I like it.
So I've heard no, I've heard 2 yeses.
Well, I feel like we're just so close. I really think it's one word that is tripping everyone up.
That tripped me up.
Word, sorry.
I'm okay.
Let's go around then.
Are we going to vote?
Gonna
Well,
go
we
around.
just kind of get the opinion of the chair, whether it's all around.
Go around and around. Karina suggested, however, after the decision has been made, the member should support the body and move forward. Karina, you good with that? Carol, you good with
Yes.
that? Jerry, you good with that?
I'm good as written.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Sure.
Marina's.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're good
Okay,
with that.
We have a consensus.
Tweak.
okay,
Got the tweak?
Got it.
You got the tweak.
I wrote it.
okay.
We have
one's
consensus,
easy.
the attorney. We have consensus.
I thought we were
One down.
going to undermine last year's council.
No,
Plays a judge on TV.
Okay,
Excuse me, Kathy, sorry. Debbie, you said that this is going for 2 hours, just this section?
Are we, yeah. I think that, Kathy, do you think another half hour?
yes, my goal is to be done in half an hour.
Okay, I think we can do that.
I support you.
Thank you.
Do you want a break?
I have a hard stop at 9, and that's pushing it.
Okay.
The plane ticket.
Okay,
Just-
we will,
Piece of cake.
okay,
We
we
will.
will honor the hard stop at 9, we'll wrap this in half an hour, and then Kyle has, okay, we're good,
Okay.
okay.
Workshop at 7.
Okay. So, this was the order it came up, but which of these is kind of the confidential information, making public statements, with boards and commissions, got that down twice, public meeting protocols, public comments, conduct of boards and commissions, the role of the liaison. And then this is, this question about who polices us. And, when it comes down to it, it's basically, you guys are the only ones that can do it, right?
The charter says you are the judge of the qualifications of your members. And what that means is you are responsible for holding each other to account. I've been in cities where we've had very structured processes of reprimands and censures. In some cities, the charter even allows the body to expel a member. I think there's some problems from a legal standpoint with that, but certainly public censure and public reprimanding is something that you'll find in many city codes, and that is how council holds itself to account.
So then the question is, do you think you need something, and would you like the attorney to draft something, or it's not an issue right now, you're not going to deal with it?
say, I would hope we wouldn't need anything, and I hope it's the least of our concerns, but if it is a concern, it's probably the most of our concern, as we've seen recently.
And I actually think it's a much bigger subject than we can do tonight, because we need to set down and a lot of councils do have an ethics code, and some of them, we made a couple attempts at it a number of years ago, and it's, Peggy probably remembers, Jerry may remember, and it's sticky and it's icky and it's tough, and some cities have a page, some cities have 20, I think Boulder's got like 20 pages or something crazy.
Arkansas is about this thing.
Yeah, so I would say.
We agreed to defer this and put it on council's work plan for.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even keep it on the plan. I don't think that we've gotten into a jam. I haven't seen that in 10 years on council. We sometimes whack each other a bit, but I don't see it something we need to deal with.
I think, in my opinion, the ones that are the ones that affect the boards and commissions, because they'll be taking the new boards and commission members will be taking their seats in a week. And Steve and,
Training is coming too.
yeah, Steve will be doing training with them, and so we want to make sure we have that buttoned up.
Okay,
Council, do you think?
Sure.
to give some guidance, even if it's not formally adopted, you can say, here's where council is going on this.
Yeah, just some of that clarity that we talked about on these issues. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that, council, do you think maybe having staff take a run at cleaning up some of that language? I mean, we may not see this back next week as a resolution. It could probably go on general business at the regular meeting if we wanted to review some cleanup, or if you needed a little extra time.
Well, it also could be a study session, depending on how far we take some of this. But we'll work diligently on it, and right now it's hard for me to make a judgment about how deep this is.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's real deep, I probably feel more comfortable just having you review it in a study session, if not even quickly.
And so what are the primary issues with the pieces in the boards and commissions? If it was a positive language, what do you want that to look like? You certainly state that they're valuable, the communication, only through a joint work session. What's the spirit or what's the sentiment that you want this to reflect? If you're looking at 7. And a 7B doesn't appear to be a problem.
7B. I think for me, it is a little rigid. And while I believe that I get the intent of it, I think it oversteps. And so it would just be kind of pull that back a bit.
You talk about B, right?
No, A.
Yeah.
Isn't it the last line of A, maybe? Because B just basically says you have to let...
Oh, wait,
something
it's not
go.
actually...
7 or 8.
Actually, it's not that one. It's...
B, is that what you're talking about?
Because I thought I heard you say that about council communications with boards shall be solely through a joint work session.
That's 4B. Where is it?
Good question.
7A, the end of 7A.
7B, at the end of 7A.
Oh, yeah. 7A.
Oh, now she knows.
So the spirit is that, and I guess the question is, do you even want that rigidity in there? That, what kind of communication do you want with your boards and commission members?
Accessible, respectful. Accessible, respectful, 2 ways. Some of the things that come to mind for me is words, I don't know that. But that's the intent that we're...
Yeah, well, what's being communicated is the body itself. That's what, when we talk to boards as an individual, you're talking as the body. Unless you give your own opinion, but you got to be very clear about that.
I think removing that sentence takes care of it, would take care of it for me.
Is everyone
Everybody
comfortable
okay
with that?
Yeah, just get it out of there.
What?
Sure. And yeah, the sentence prior takes care of the quasi-judicial.
I'm all for removing stuff.
If we took that out, would it, and I'm not pushing for any direction at all, just clarification, would it allow then one-on-one conversations between a council member and a board member?
Steve, is there any problem with this?
I think the only, and I think we've addressed it in the sentence before, obviously when we have quasi-judicial boards like the Board of Adjustment, it would be completely inappropriate for a council member to discuss a matter pending in front of that quasi-judicial board. And I think we've addressed that in the prior sentence.
Yeah.
But that's just an important
It's
point to be understood.
important emphasis, and so you could even perhaps refer to other places where you talk about the quasi-judicial nature of things.
Yeah,
But we're keeping that other sentence in,
Yeah,
right?
we're keeping everything except the last sentence.
Of which one? The last-
7A.
Okay.
That change won't require a study session.
The confidential information, I think that is important, and maybe if council's okay with it, that would be a city attorney workover.
Yes, yes.
Okay, you probably don't like this that's in here anyway, do you?
No, I'd like to deal with that because there's both this protocol and it creates a whole separate set of ethical issues for you, the lawyer, because I represent you as a body, not as individuals, but when one of you discloses confidential information, it directly impacts my ability to represent the body as a whole. So it,
And that goes for the boards and commissions too.
and that's the same with the boards and commissions. I'd like to take a shot at reworking that.
Okay. Then, well, at least I still have page 5 open. And you noted the role of the liaison with, under item 8, council meetings with boards and commissions. And I think it's the end of paragraph B.
Yeah, it is.
About the role of the liaison. So do you want to talk a little bit maybe about the intent and what you would like to see?
I just think it should be more, I just think we could probably, in fewer words, make it more clear. Because essentially the role of the liaison is to attend the meeting, share what council's doing, and bring the information from the board back to council during council comments, period, end of story.
But generally, the communication should be how if it affects that board at all. Like something going on in that neighborhood of the museum, for instance. You know, we want to communicate that to the museum board if something's going to happen on Littleton Boulevard traffic. So, I mean, that's, to me, it's usually to the particular board or commission.
This is clear to me.
Does that make sense what I just said? Yeah.
But it says that, it's to convey current and relevant information.
That's exactly what I said. Instead of just rambling on about a lot of stuff.
I think you can delete the last two fragments there with the first part
Right,
of the
if it
sentence.
is requested in a conduit of council activity.
So the conduit of council activity and actions.
I don't know.
That's relevant information on council activities. It's just redundant. So we can delete those last two.
Peggy, you missed that.
After
Come on.
commission.
So what I'm hearing is just kind of period after. The role of the liaison shall be to convey current and relevant information on council activities to the individual board or commission.
Period. Look at us. Cutting out copy.
I'm all for it.
Jerry's happy.
See, we're
happy. That's right. That's right. I don't know. It's one of those
Okay.
goofy things you gotta say.
So 3 other items are up here. One, item 4, making public statements, and I have it there, actually, I have it there twice. And item 2, meeting protocols, And you had mentioned about public comments, but you said staff is already working on that kind of language? Or is there something else?
I think the one the mayor referenced was a minor change we had talked about before here. It's fine.
Yeah, it's the,
Where are we here?
by the time, we're back on page 1, item 2, meeting protocols. On here, we've got 12 PM on the day of a council meeting. We accept that up until 5 PM
Yeah.
from emails. And so that's primarily for, obviously,
Wendy.
public hearings. Usually it's in a rezone where
Yeah.
we get a lot of the public comment at the last minute. And we have to have a cutoff because it has to get to us, and we would really like to be able to read it. It doesn't always happen.
So we have time to read it too.
Oh, I was going to say, although when we're at a public hearing, we're hearing it right then and there. Oh, but you're saying you can't be reading your emails when you're doing it in a public
The
hearing.
problem with this becomes is that if you have emails that come in after 5, like at 6 or whatever, you may not have all of the council members have that email, and you're required in quasi-judicial matters to decide based on the record. So I completely agree with the clerk on this. We have to have an arbitrary cutoff so that we have a complete record. Otherwise, we're going to find that we're going to have litigation over the quasi-judicial because you'll be using information outside the record.
To play devil's advocate or the critical eye or
To play Peggy Cole.
If we receive information at 5 o'clock, even though it's on our computer and for legal purposes it's part of the packet, doesn't mean I read it.
Not
I've had a
only-
chance to read it and be prepared, be prepared to use it in my overall decision that evening.
No, it's not even saying we have it, it's if Wendy gets it or you get it at 4:50, then you have to turn around and give it to us.
We
That's a
have
sticky
it,
one.
we usually have it at the dais. Wendy will usually print those out that come in after 5, and we have it at the dais. Now, we had it, as you can see here, we had it at 12 PM. And in an effort to be more generous to the community in time to get to us, it was 5. So and you're right, I mean, even though we may give them till 5, does it matter if we can't read it?
And
'Cause we
maybe
don't
the
read it at the
suggestion,
dais.
so I see the value and I absolutely support given, up to 5 o'clock really, if we're talking about a public hearing, it should be, we will accept information at any point in time, bring it forward. But maybe a way to solve for this is that anything that is received is shared publicly at the meetings. Now that adds time to the meeting, so that if you can't be there in person, at least your email will be read out loud. That's the only way to ensure everybody has.
Well, it's part of the record, it just doesn't need to be part of the audio record. It's part of the written record.
But
Is it a basis of our decision making?
so the issue.
Emails I get a week before, we don't read at a council meeting. I mean, we can get upwards of, depending on what it can be, we can get 100 emails. And it is, I don't think that is a good practice. I don't think that's a good use of our time to read 100 emails. And, because some of those emails could be quite long, go longer than the 3-minute limit. So,
So the
And I think you
issue
have to give
is
more
that
time.
we should get them and be able to read them. The ones that we get by the deadline, we should be able to read before we vote. It seemed to me once, Debbie, maybe we took a little time during a council meeting to allow council to read ones that had come in by the deadline, but some people, because they work or whatever, hadn't had a chance to look at them. And so at the very least, people could skim them to see. Or on one thing, I think Wendy made a list of pros,
She's done that.
the pros and cons, people for or against, so we at least have the enumeration.
I would say that I would suggest we move the time maybe to 4 o'clock and that we all be very vigilant about making sure that we do read those. It's not a ton that come in. when we had what was the latest one we had?
Marijuana was one.
Yeah, marijuana was one, and then there was another, what was that rezone?
Oh.
There was a rezone.
On Santa Fe there.
And,
Yeah.
and we got about 30 emails in one day. There may have been 5 of those that came in after 5 o'clock. So I think a lot of it is incumbent upon us when we've got a heated topic going on and we know these things are going to be coming. We really need to stay on top of the emails.
It's generally not a big issue though.
Yeah, when it doesn't happen, I mean, I think it's probably happened a half a dozen times since I've been on council, but part of it is us being responsible to that, and then I agree, Karina, I hear what you're saying. They do go to the record. They are not read though, but they are in the public record and we have them. So we're the ones that will be making the decision, so we've read them, hopefully. That's the best. City attorney.
No, I think the 4 o'clock, I think that certainly, the key is that you, on the quasi judicial, whether it's not so critical, I mean, obviously, I think it's appropriate that council members all read their email, but the key is that we have to have them in to where the clerk can incorporate them in that matter and they are part of the record. So, the key thing is really us being able to take those and have them in the official record.
Yeah, Wendy was a part of that discussion when we came up with that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing just change it to 4 o'clock.
And I think we're all just going to stay on it. Okay. Boom.
And the other item that you had brought up, and we have 12 minutes, is under item 4, making public statements, A, B, and C.
I just think that language needs to be maybe a little less flowery and a little bit more exact, more precise, more clear, so that, and particularly for boards and commissions, so that they understand their role as a board or commission member in the public too. And maybe the city attorney can give a spin on that.
I'd be happy to. I mean, the key here, I think, is very simply, when you're on a board and commission and you identify yourself as a board and commission member, I'm Mr. Smith and I'm a member of the planning commission. You're identifying yourself as a city.
Putting the hat on.
You put the city hat on. Now, you cannot then go and say, I'm Mr. Smith, I'm a member of the planning commission, and I want to tell you how awful the staff is. They're utterly incompetent, they don't know what they're doing, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That isn't appropriate.
Are there other comments about kind of the intent, or just to clarify the sentiment on those 3 items? So it's on page 3, making public statements, A, B, and C.
I think it's good.
Okay?
One thing that I think we should talk about that isn't in here, and I know that, and then there were,
Mark's some issues.
We've hit most of them. Well, we still have some time, and that is, Carol has brought up the issue of district meetings and how we should handle those. What should be the protocol? We don't have a protocol. Over the years, it's gone from, probably more generous to less generous, and it's been kind of a bunch in between. I know that in my experience, the staff has been very clear that it is not a financial responsibility of the city. Part of the reason for that is because it's hard to control 7 council members spending. So one of the things, I snooped around to some other cities, and Kathy, you and I had a conversation about this too, and one of the things that a lot of other cities do, which I think is a really good solution because it does honor the desire of the council member to be able to reach out to their community and reach out to their citizens. It's but it also kind of helps with the financial burden of that, is to give each council member, I'm going to make up a number, $500 that they can have over for the year to use as community outreach. And you can use that in whichever way you would feel is most appropriate for the way you want to reach out to your community. I may go to a Starbucks and put up a little thing that says, come talk to me and I'll buy you a coffee and
Cardboard cutout here.
I'll go borrow a table.
Talk to the mayor.
Those signs from downtown.
How about beer? Can we buy beer?
No, we cannot buy
Not
beer.
by alcohol. Ice
We
cream.
cannot buy beer. Ice cream, yes.
Better than beer.
Yeah, you're right.
But it could be, you could do that, you could do a mailer, it's $500, it's not, you're not gonna, go big and go crazy with it, but it gives everybody kind of an evenness and an opportunity that if they do want to do something, it's not something you have to go pull out of your own pocket for. So that it may be something, if you guys are interested in doing something like that. I know some council members just, that they don't do anything, and others, want to do more. So it just kind of keeps it even. Did you want
I
to
think
say?
the one caveat with that is that in the time preceding an election, we cannot use city money. So what I would recommend is that 6 months prior to the city election, if you haven't used your 500, you can't use it because we can't be spending public money to influence elections, so the city will be in violation of the Fair Campaign Practices Act.
I'm not in favor
Up there.
of giving money.
I'm sorry, you are?
No.
Not?
Oh, money part. I don't like the money part. I think there's something Carol and I talked about, like the report, putting an announcement in the report. But as I was talking about the other day, is that if it's a boilerplate letter, so it's not a campaign type announcement, just a boilerplate in the report. I'm talking about the letter that comes out. Just
Publicizing
Mary's
it.
going to have the meet and greet type thing at King Soopers or wherever.
Oh, within the Littleton report?
Yes, the Littleton
Yeah,
report.
got it.
Or the
But just a generic,
Yeah.
a boilerplate thing.
And that's fine, when we look at that in the 6 months before an election,
Still, yeah.
we still look at that, because if it looks like somehow it is designed to promote a person for re-election or election, then that becomes an issue. Now, the one exception is we'll do sort of an introduction to all the candidates, and they get to give us a bio, and we publish that as they written. But other than that, we exercise very closely guarded restraint over that, because the city does not want to be involved in any thing that would bring us within the confines of the Fair Campaign Practices Act.
Well, I think what we should be asking is, why are we doing this? This is a way, this is a need for public outreach and engagement, ensuring that our citizens are able to engage with the city in different ways, provide input, have conversation, dialogue, etc. So that's what we're really trying to solve for. And I think that's how we have to approach this first before we say maybe it's, an allotment, or maybe it's just publishing in a report. If we're trying to ensure that we are creating different opportunities for engagement with our citizens, depending on various things, then I think we should come up with a communication strategy so that it is fair, right? It's equitable. It's as council, not as individuals, so we don't risk ourselves during campaign seasons. And 6 months is an arbitrary number. Is it 6 months? Is it a year? Is it 3 months? So I think it really is about us taking a hard look at what is our engagement and communication strategy with our public, and determining what are some tactics to fulfill that. I do think this does tie back to what came out as one of our priorities of building collaborative relationships. So to me, it's let's begin to identify some of the plans or tactics that help us to meet that objective.
I think that's important. We do have the council meet and greets, but I think having more opportunities for individual council members to go out or two at a time to go out there beyond those opportunities is important. And I don't, think we as individuals should have to say, oh, I've got to spend $50 to buy donuts or coffee or something like that, because that might be a roadblock to actually getting out to the community when you may want to. You may say, I don't want to do that. Having some sort of stipend would be important, because you don't want to have to necessarily spend your own money, or, as Carol's done, has gotten donations, which could also be iffy in the future. Say you went to Andy's Custards or something, and they said, oh, we'll provide you $1,000 worth of ice cream. Well, 5 months down the road, they come back with some issue that's before us. That could be bad.
And let me just throw something else out here for consideration, is that sometimes, you ought to include in your conversation what this means in regards to staff time. Because that's the other piece, that if you're having quarterly meetings with the public and you expect a full staff contingent, what does that mean? And what about consistency? If it's just you and coffee with your constituents with no staff, that looks something different. So I just throw that out as you think about it. And it almost sounds like this is a bigger issue than just kind of district meetings, that it really is kind of more about your strategy and how you meet your goal of collaborative relationships, outreach, that kind of thing. So, Carol?
I would like to talk about what I've done. And that the purpose is, it came out of Littleton Village, really. A lot of citizens had lots of concerns, and so we got Mark in front of a District 3 meeting with a very controlled environment where people could put their questions and concerns on cards, and then we consolidated those, and Mark addressed them, and it went beautifully. It didn't cost us anything to have the event, because we used a room it didn't cost anything, and we had donations for coffee and the food, and we wouldn't have to have the coffee and food if that was a concern. I would never want to spend city money on that. And our only expense was to send out postcards, because we don't have very many email addresses. And so going forward on this, that's the only expense that I would see. The only staff time we used was Mark. And
man used doesn't matter, so.
And we only used him for half an hour, though he stuck around for more, so it was half an hour of Mark's time. A lot. I'm really grateful. Next time around, Tim Nims is going to, he volunteered to head up a group. He does that all the time at the museum, so we're using the museum space. And again, no cost to anybody, except for I'm going to send out postcards again, fewer than last time because I got some email addresses. The purpose of this is to keep communication going with people who want to communicate. Some really do. And I would much rather have them at a meeting where they can talk to us face to face, both during the meeting and before and after, rather than let them get all bottled up and irritated, and then they come to council and.
And so are you advocating for not doing the setting $500?
I would love to have $500 or any amount to cover the cost of sending out the postcards, because I get the postcards printed. They just say where and when, and then the postage. And so it cost me $300 last time to send out postcards.
So is this not something that could be announced in the Littleton report?
Good idea.
Yeah, that's what, I started there, and the response I got was, we don't do that. And so then I went to the mailing.
Well, maybe we do that if we decide.
They've done it for every council member.
Kelly absolutely refused.
So I feel like we're coming back to just trying to find different ways we can do this, but I think, Carol said it. The intent here, and this is just one way to fulfill the intent, but the intent is to allow the community to engage with us in different ways. And that's why I personally think that this is a bigger question than whether we should have a stipend or not, whether it's on the Littleton report or not. It's really what are the many ways that we can, and then we decide as a council what that strategy is going to be and how we're going to do it, and we get the recommendations from staff and an understanding of staff commitment, a financial commitment, and otherwise.
No staff time.
I really think I think right now we're just saying, oh, we'll do this now and then we'll maybe do something else, and I don't think that's the right
Now,
approach.
the reason I was going the direction I was is we don't have money. We just don't have money to deal with all the needs that the city is facing. So there are various ways to try to.
There are
publicize
various
what
ways,
it-
that's just it, it's let's define what we're trying to accomplish and then develop a criteria of the different ways we
So,
can.
so let's do, sorry, Kyle and Carol, and then Debbie, and then kind of wrap this up since I'm cognizant of time.
Yes.
And see where to go with this.
I mean, I agree with Karina, this is a larger discussion. I fully support the vision that Carol has for doing this. And as far as the money, I think this actually is probably a very efficient use. For $100, if you can get 50 people or 30 people, that might be better than $100 spent in something else, than $50,000 of something else. I think it's yes, we don't have money, but it's a very small amount of money you're talking about. That could have a very big impact.
We had 15
Very
people
meaningful.
at that
Right.
meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Could we go as far as allowing it to be announced in the Littleton Report as simply District 3 meeting?
Sure.
It's not going to cost anything to do that.
Sure, it's really, I think it's your decision here on how you want to manage that. I'm on my end.
Just a boilerplate letter, yeah,
Yeah.
or something like that. It was interesting, I just heard it's not very much money, but yet we don't want to pay it ourselves. As long as the taxpayers pay it, yeah, it's not very much money.
Well, I've been paying it so
Yeah,
far.
I know you have, yeah. But I,
And that's kind of a
I've done
dilemma.
that, I've done that myself, and I'm okay with doing that.
And just in principle, whether or not you as individuals could do that, but if you're really an inclusive community and want everyone to have this opportunity, what if you have people on council who cannot afford to do that? And then that puts them in that position. So there's, separated between you as individuals and what's good policy, so.
Yeah, yep. I think it's a fair statement.
Okay, so, and I brought this up because Carol has made comments about the issue, and in fact, at one of the council meetings during council comments, made a comment about it, and that she was taking the money out of her own pocket, and I thought, I thought that was a message to the community that I wanted to, that we probably needed to address. I don't know that that was what I wanted the community to think, that, it's like the teachers buying supplies. No, we don't have, yes, we're trying to fix streets, but the council does have a budget. Part of the council's responsibility is to have communication. I don't think that there's, I don't see a problem with that. I don't want to overthink this. It does not need to be overthought. Each council member, you want to use it, you can use it. You don't want to use it, you don't have to use it. The $500 is not going to get you a mailing every time you want to do a thing. It helps a little bit. I think that the community our staff has a communications plan, and if we have our meet and greets, we have all the things that we need to do. It may behoove Mark to have a comprehensive page of what those look like so that council members can decide. But I really don't want to process through this thing over and over again. This was just an idea. If we're not interested in doing it, then we'll just move on. If we are interested in doing it, I think it should be just done nice, quickly, and simply, and not have to go through a lot of gyrations about this, because we really have other things that are a lot more important. We'll move it to parking lot and take it up on a next available open study session, because we're never going to get to it.
Okay.
So your turn.
No, that's what I was going to say, is just to kind of rework what I heard, that there are changes that have been noted, relatively minor, changing 4 o'clock, deleting a sentence or two. The city attorney is going to work on the confidential information part, as well as the statements with boards and commissions. You're going to defer and put on a council work plan for later about kind of your own ethics and policing, and this larger conversation, it sounds like you're just moving it to the parking lot to come up at a later point in time about, what is the strategy? How does council communication and outreach fit into the larger communication plan of the city? Is that?
And I have one other question of clarification. What about all of these? What's going to happen?
What will happen, I'm going to take pictures of these and leave the originals with you, and then type this up and send it back to you.
And then
And then,
what is staff going to do with this?
Well, based on the conversation that followed this, then we're going to go ahead and modify a change to your protocols to kind of reflect that conversation. I'll submit it to you for probably a resolution to adopt. Steve has some work to kind of plug into this as well.
So beyond what we just picked up here, because there's lots of little things on these other ones. So I'm just trying to ensure that these don't get lost and they do go back. You do go back and look at the protocols in more detail and ensure that some of these elements, if we didn't talk about them on the summary page, that they've been.
and perhaps,
I'm sorry, Kathy, Karina, I would suggest that these remain separate from, I do not think that integrating them into these protocols. These are protocols that go to boards and commissions. These are what we expect of each other. So I think having a document of that the council has.
It's not an adopted protocol.
Yeah, I think that would be, we can adopt it for ourselves, but I would keep it out of the protocol document because it goes to boards and commissions. And if they want to do this kind of exercise for each other, that would be great. But that would be kind of addendum to this for us.
okay,
That's clear.
Easy next step, okay.
okay, awesome. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your participation. I'm going to take my pictures. It's yours now.
Thank you very much. What time is it?
It's 8:37.
37. Okay.
Debbie, if it's okay with you, I'm just going to excuse myself because I don't want to leave mid-conversation or put any pressure on moving this
It'd be
forward.
tough to leave.
Yeah.
I can see
So
that.
I just feel like I'll be more disruptive if I leave mid.
You have to leave at 9?
Yeah.
And Kyle, how long is yours?
Don't imagine it'd be that long, but who knows? I thought other conversations would be 10 minutes and less than 2 hours, so, you know.
You can always.
Well, Karina won't be here though.
Well, then it'll be 10 minutes.
Oh, is that okay?
Or you can stay and leave at 9. You won't be disturbing us if you leave.
I won't take offense if you walk out when I'm talking.
How about if I leave while you're talking?
I can see leaving.
Very much offense.
Okay, let's get started.
Did you want to?
Well, just a brief introduction here. So Kyle came to staff here, me specifically, and was asking some questions about, I think how we might involve kind of younger people into local government. And so we did some research. Sarah Fox isn't here this evening. Her sister had a baby today, so normally she'd be here to kind of maybe comment on some of the detail. But so we researched what several other cities had done. In fact, Kyle, you may have seen something, a presentation or two, perhaps. So based on that, we drafted a staff communication showing you some of that research. We even drafted a set of bylaws, and I think that if the council has some interest in this issue, we've given you a possible suggestion. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Kyle and let you.
Yeah, so this actually started, I've watched a council meeting, I think a year or two ago, and I remember I heard Bill Hopping say something about some sort of youth advisory panel, youth commission, and I was like, that sounds like an interesting idea. And I think it was December or November, we had, there were 2 young gentlemen that attended a council meeting, and I think we have one right here. We have Brian Carlson and Carl Tomasetti. Yes, sir. Came and said that they had a desire to form some sort of young person. I had been using the term youth advisory panel, but I don't want to limit it to youth in the the common sense where it's just high schools. I think Jefferson County has a youth leadership council that they kind of do this with, but it's just high school kids. So talking with Brian and Carl, they were trying to come up with some idea to have young adults, high school seniors, juniors, working with college students, recent college graduates, to kind of give the input of those residents and citizens in the community here. And we kind of talked with Mark and Sam and talked about different ways to, we want to try to hold one spot on each commission for that, which I didn't think was all that feasible, but maybe have just sort of some advisory panel where we have a group of individuals that can give ideas to council or bounce council ideas off of them. Say, hey, council is looking at this sort of rezone, development, whatever, what do you guys think of that? We get a lot of input from the retired crowd, and we don't get a lot of input from the 20-somethings, and I think if there's some way to be proactive and get them involved. I don't know if you guys want to, if you...
No, we can't.
No? Okay.
He can't speak.
Okay.
Any questions?
I've been involved a little bit with this also, with these guys, and I thought it was a great idea when I first heard it. I liked what the direction they were going. I applaud them for wanting to get in government at this early stage in their life, and what Kyle's done, and with Mark's help, I think we're going in the right direction. I definitely think their voices need to be heard. There might be some discussion out there whether, we put a council together for as you said, the next generation. What about the middle generation, the older generation? Well, they'll let them put their council together if they want to, but I think I like the direction this is going.
I mean, we're looking at other cities that have done this. There are pretty much every city and even states have these advisory panels, and they tend to be quite large. A lot of them are between 15 to 40 people. I don't think we need anything that large. I reached out to superintendent and the director of secondary schools at LPS, and they thought this was a great idea. They thought they would have a lot of interest from high school seniors. Originally, I was thinking just high school seniors, and they said, why don't you open it to juniors, because I think there'd be juniors that would want to get involved. I don't know what the age limit restriction is, and that'd be a question that I have for the attorney. If there's an issue with having an age requirement or age restrictions, a lot of other municipalities in the states, are very explicit with the ages.
No, I think you could certainly do an age limitation, the nature of this. I think you could, and I've seen it both ways. I've seen pure youth commissions and more of this network, I'd call next generation type structure. And so this really, you can take either approach.
I guess my thought is they do have an opportunity. Everybody has an opportunity to speak to the city. We have citizens' comments during every meeting. We only do it once now, but we used to do it twice.
If you have a public hearing.
Yeah, anytime. Anybody of whatever age can come talk to the city. I think when we had our boards and commission meetings, we had lots of 30-somethings and 40-somethings and some 20s come and interview for those jobs. That's a very difficult thing to do, but they did. I guess I'm a little hesitant to add something else. This will take city staff time. Minimal or not, it'll take city staff time. It'll take city staff funds. And I encourage people to get involved. There's so many ways to be involved. We don't need to invent another way. I don't think we need to have city government here be the solution. We have so many opportunities for people to respond, whether it's email, coming to meetings like Carol has done several times on her own time.
And money.
And, but I just think there's other ways. I guess part of what I'm thinking here, I feel like we're coddling people to get involved. People know they should be involved. They don't have time to be involved. When they do have time to get involved, they get involved, and the desire to get involved. I think just by trying to coddle a certain group of people, saying, come on, you guys, get involved. When I've gone and looked, I've gone online too, and I've looked at some of these groups. The attendance on these things are dismal. They're not very good. And I think the city staff and city council has better things to spend their time on. I encourage young people to come speak to us at our meetings, to understand what we're talking about. Read. Just don't show up at a meeting, have people talk to you. Understand what our meetings are about. Go to planning commission meetings, go to liquor authority meetings, go to all these. There's so many meetings out there. There's the Littleton Leadership Group. I don't know a whole lot about that, but I know years ago Littleton had a leadership group, and I attended it. It was very informative. That's what people should be doing to find out about the city. Go out and find out. But if we're just going to coddle them and say, hey, look, we're going to define this committee, and it's not just citizens of Littleton, I'm not in favor of that. I don't want to spend money, and I don't want to spend time on staff time to do this.
Karina?
So what I do like about this is that it's an attempt to
engage our community, a broader community, people that there's a lot of people that we actually don't see, right? So it's, call them 18, call them 25, call them 55. I mean, there's a lot of people we don't see. And I'm sorry that I'm kind of harping on this, but I'm coming back to what are the different ways that people can engage with us? And sometimes the structure of a public hearing on a Tuesday night from 6:30 to 9 o'clock doesn't always work for everyone. So to your statement of, a lot of times people don't get involved because they don't have time. That doesn't mean that they don't have a vested interest. That doesn't mean that they don't want to, but they may just have other priorities, or not necessarily priorities, but other just limitations, time being one of them. So to me, it does come back to a need to find a way to make engagement in public service accessible for different people with different means, whether it's financial means, time means, resource means, et cetera. So I think of parents can't leave their kids at home, right? I mean, I have to pay for a babysitter to come to a public hearing. So I think it goes beyond the 18 to 30 to 34 that's proposed here. In looking at some of this, one of the areas that I do like and I support, because it's not in addition to what we're already doing, but it is another opportunity to engage, is having a youth in the Authority Board and Commission, so that they're already beginning to experience parts of government. There's usually less of a time commitment at that level, and that's kind of, to me, the boards has always been, or volunteer opportunities have always been, your entry into civic engagement. So I am supportive of trying to look at where and how to engage this group of citizens. I'm not, at this juncture, fully supportive of creating something completely separate. I think let's find a way to better integrate, whether it's advertised to the Littleton Public Schools when we're having boards and commissions, that we want a representation from high school or college age or something like that.
Carol. I would like to support what Karina said there with the, before we create something separate for them, to try harder to include them in what we're already doing in active outreach, and we would have to brainstorm what that means. I want to ask the city attorney, do we get into trouble with age discrimination at all by having this group, one age group, or one interest group but not others?
Well, the city, in terms of the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, could not do this kind of thing for employment purposes. But for terms of creating a citizen advisory board, that would be outside the act. So it would be permissible for us to structure a board in this fashion.
And then a concern I have is about creating expectations. Often when there is an advisory board, I think that very term creates or it has for me before when I learned not to be on them. I expect for people to want to listen to my group's advice if I'm part of an advisory board. And I went online and looked at a similar kind of commission that Aspen has, and I looked at their minutes. And what they were concerned about is what we're concerned about, which was housing, affordable housing, was transportation, and so I think we don't know how to take care of the problem that we have now, and so to create more expectation that we're ready to deal with that for a special group might be problematic for us. I would love to address that, but I don't know about the implied promises of having an advisory group.
My take again is, you got a youth group here that wants to get involved, and they want to have their voice be heard. They probably will have come up with different ideas. Looking at the average age around this table, I think we could we can learn something from our youth out there. So again, it's not so much these guys, telling us, how it's going to be. It's, these are our concerns, have you guys thought about these concerns? Are we addressing these concerns, going forward? How do we afford a house in Littleton? How do we stay in this community? And so, these are things, as you mentioned, Carol, are already up for, we're already discussing those things. But I support, I think having a different perspective, because unfortunately we have all these boards, but their voice, one voice in a board of 10 or 12 doesn't get heard very well. But I think if you come up with a specific, as we said, next generation, now they're coming together as a group and really expressing their desires and needs.
Peggy?
So I don't support this, but I do support doing some things, more of some things that at least some of us have done during the time that I've been on council. So I've been invited to schools, I've been invited to Brownie troops, I've been invited to several youth-related things. So I get to hear, they get to talk to me. Sometimes the parents see me in the grocery store and they introduce the kids to me and then I ask the kids stuff. So I think the opportunity is there, maybe communicating with various classes and schools, maybe government classes. Kids in the 5th grade seem to be really ripe for this in terms of lower grades, but the higher grades, any school that has some kind of student government, making the teachers and schools aware that at least some council people are available during the day to come and speak and answer questions and whatever. But I don't see a need to be doing this, but to be creating this, but instead, if necessary, engaging in our outreach more. Go to where they are and have the conversations and talk to them at our meet and greets.
Kyle?
I don't think this is coddling in the least. I think this is the city and council being proactive in setting up a forum to listen to a group of concerned citizens that came forward and said, we want to start this. And so this is a way for us to say, we want to hear you. We don't expect you to come speak at a public forum every Tuesday night, or we understand you have different, that's the thing is, I think is, we don't understand that, Jerry wants him to do it.
That's perfect.
Outburst, that was pretty good.
The city attorney's kind of technologically challenged.
Watching a hockey game.
It's a miracle on ice over there.
So
It was actually a protest.
as a younger representative of the community, I mean, when I hear Jerry say that, I kind of hear him say, do it my way or get off my lawn, is kind of what I hear. And I think
Now, are you attacking me or giving your opinion?
I'm giving my opinion. That's what I hear you
Okay,
say.
because if you're going to attack me on that, then I'll respond.
Yeah, I'm just saying, when I hear...
That's right, that's right.
I hear that saying that, this is how you have to do it. So I think this is an opportunity to, hey, you guys get together. We don't know what you want to hear, what you want us to hear as a group. And so I think that's what this was initiated as.
I have, so there is absolutely a desire and a need. I experienced it when we brought the Boy Scouts in and they, experienced and went through like a mock council session. So it's incredibly well received and desired, wanting to engage. I would love to hear from some of these, those that have come forward that has been led by a certain group of individuals. It sounds like people have been approaching you, Kyle. I would love to hear kind of from them and really try to understand where they feel they're not able to do that so that we can bring forward the right solution. Now, maybe that's exactly what you've done here, but I guess I'd want a little bit more of that context.
And I hear with the school groups and the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, that's this isn't the target demographic, and that is the structure that they have been provided to have a voice, is their school and their troop. Whereas this is a 25, 28-year-old, 30-year-old doesn't have that structure, that forum to necessarily provide their voice as a group. I'm sure they could come down or send us an email, which is fine, but I think that as a constituent base, that they want to provide more than just their individual voice.
So say the age.
So in here it said 17 to...
No, what you just said.
Say what I just said?
Yeah, in terms of age. You mentioned the age.
Say what you just
Adjourn
said.
so we can watch the video right now.
Time out.
Hey, I said, so when your example of going to schools in 5th grade, and Karina's example of Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, I said that's not, this specific commission isn't for going to elementary schools to hearing what. And when I went to the 3rd grade class, they were asking about geese poop. That's not the realm of.
It wouldn't with mine were, but anyway.
Well, okay.
So, Kyle, do you mind?
No.
If I do a quick wrap on this. So, I think there's a couple of things I'm hearing. Number one is we have a shortage of staff time, and I think in terms of priorities, we are maxing out in terms of our work ahead of us. So something new would have to be something that would not infringe upon those types of activities, and I think that there needs to be a caution to that, because we've seen over time some of these things can kind of create a life of their own, and before you know it, we've got something that's requiring more staff time and more financial assistance than we were prepared to do. That being said, I really, really appreciate what you're doing here, and I appreciate that you are responding to what you're hearing. I think that Littleton has begun to see a demographic shift. It will be slow, most demographic shifts are, but we know that as an older aged community that it turns over. People don't live forever, and houses go for sale, and jobs change, and employers leave, and sorry, Jared, didn't mean to blow that illusion for you. But those things happen, and I think we're seeing the immigration that's happened in the state has started to affect the changes in demographics, and I think that we're seeing that in a lot of different places around the community, and so that group also has a very different way of interacting, and it is less about coming down to meetings and more about social media, more about electronic, and more about those types of things. And so I would propose, I think that you've got something here. I don't know that it's as gelled as it could be for us to be able to make a decision, or a yes or a no. I hear there's varying degrees of support, varying degrees of no support. So here's my suggestion. Why don't you talk to the core of the folks, to the people that you think would be the movers and the shakers, the primary folks, and why don't we have one of our council breakfasts with them and have that conversation, similar to what Karina was alluding to, and have this conversation. What do they want? How do they want it? How can we provide that? What does it start to look like? And we've done a number of task forces. We've done a budget task force. We did a charter task force, charter amendments. We've done a lot of these where we bring in a group of citizens, and they are an advisory task force group. So it is effective. It does work. It does change.
We used to do it with the high schoolers too.
Yeah, we met with the high schoolers, but it can change policy. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that it is a good thing. We should not be operating in a vacuum. But what does that look? All of those task forces required a substantial amount of staff time. So can we reinvent that wheel? Can we get a good result without doing it the same old way that has become burdensome and kind of ineffective after a point? So if you're willing to kind of march down that path, and council is, we have a general head nod of support to at least have another conversation with some of these folks, and think about how, it's like my favorite quote from the mayor of Glendale is, let's start with yes. You don't get anywhere starting with no. We have issues, we have concerns, there's things that need to be worked out, but let's start there. And you work with the folks you need to. We'll set up, we've got a couple openings in the next, maybe into summer or so we'll have some time some runway to get that planned and move that way. Everybody good?
Yep.
All right.
Sounds
Really
good.
glad you could stay. Happy flying.
Have a good trip.
We're adjourned.
All right.
And the grounds.